There we go.
That's a cool intro.
Little rocker introduction there.
Yeah, I
Hello,
like it.
everybody. Hello. My name is Margaret Pinard. I'm a historical fiction and fantasy author, and we're not talking about anything creative writing this month. We're talking about Agitation August, as you can see. So for this month, I'm inviting other Booktube folks, AuthorTube folks, over on my channel to talk about a book that agitated them. And we're going to dive right in. So, Brian, say hello and tell us a little bit about your channel and what you like to read.
My name's Brian. My channel is Bookish Texan, even though I just say bookish because that's what it used to be till I messed up and changed the name. I review and talk about all kinds of topics related to literature and politics, and I review books from time to time, and just usual, pretty standard Booktube stuff.
Yes. And you manage to do lots of different styles, which keeps it entertaining. So I'm happily subscribed for probably like all 5 years I've been on Booktube. So it's great to have you on the channel.
Thanks. Always good to be here.
Well, so my channel, I write historical fiction. And part of what drives me to write historical fiction is that I see things happening now, injustices, let's call them, and how they also happened in the past and probably will continue happening. And so I mind the past for things we can use for the present. And I feel like we're in a moment, and this is why I chose to highlight this month, we're in a moment where the forces of injustice are sort of ganging up on us. So what was a book that shook you up? And can you show us the book? Do you have the book?
Oh, I don't. I haven't had an e-copy of the book, so it's on my Kindle. Okay. I didn't bring it in here. So it was AI Empire by Sarah
KAREN HAO.
KAREN HAO. Sorry, I knew I forget the first name. That's why I needed to have the book here. So I read that because I was already agitated about AI, and so I read it to learn more about AI, and I became more agitated. So the title of this month definitely fits. I wish I could say I was agitated in a hopeful way. I don't want to give away the party right out of the gate, but not a lot in there made me feel less agitated.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah. Okay, and so what's interesting is that what I'm discovering is that when I've invited people on to talk about a book that shook them up, sometimes people have read it and they know their reactions, and sometimes it's on a topic, like you're saying, that is like really agitating you, but you haven't read that book yet. So you read this after, and so my question about how did it come into your life is sort of null, because it was after you already decided that it would be your book. But what about AI in general as a concept? Did you originally have like a lukewarm, neutral kind of approach? And then like, what was the beginning of like let me get an antenna out here and maybe look at this a little more closely?
I think the thing that probably got my attention first was the lawsuit that the group of authors brought against, I guess, Meta and OpenAI for ChatGPT, essentially, I think they call it scraping. Books and works that were under copyright to train their large language model, which is what ChatGPT really is, and to give it like the information it needed to work from. And it just so happened that somebody shared a link with me, or the Atlantic had a link where you could go see if your work was in there. Yeah. And I thought, well, I haven't written very much, and so I just put my name in, and sure enough, an article I wrote many years ago for a historical journal was in there. And I thought, well, it's not that big a deal to me. The copyright really isn't mine. It's really the magazine or the journal's copyright. But I thought it kind of gave me a personal interest in that aspect of AI. And, being on Booktube, we constantly hear people talking about the threat AI poses to creatives, to artists and writers, and other people. And, that's something I take really seriously. And then I think maybe before that, the NaNoWriMo and its kind of lackadaisical attitude towards AI also kind of got me a little agitated. That's the word of the month. So that I was thinking about it a lot. And so I just kind of began reading and listening and watching other people's videos about AI to learn more kind of about what it was, how it worked, and what it wasn't. There's a really great video, and now I can't remember the name of it, but she's a physics person who has a physics channel, and she also has a book channel. And she basically went through and said everything, what AI is and isn't. And her contention is that it's just machine learning. It's not capable of independent thought now. So it's really just spewing out things based on the amount of text that it has and what it's learned and what's been able to scrape and, those kind of things. That if it's generating something, it's really just generating a facsimile of something that's some data that's been put into it somehow. And I thought that was really interesting. And initially it made me feel better about AI and its limitations, but I'm not sure those good feelings have stuck
Would that
around.
be Angela? I know she's a scientist.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's physics. Maybe.
She has dark hair and wears glasses, and mostly she talks about science. So she has two different channels.
Okay.
The book channel is the one she posts on the least often.
Okay.
But
well, you bring up an interesting angle. So obviously we share looking at AI from this angle. So artificial intelligence is a huge concept that encompasses a lot of different things. You previously released a video about 6 months ago that I'm going to drop in the chat in a sec, but explained about the fact that we're already using a lot of versions of AI, but what we're coming up against as a new thing and sort of an ethical issue is the generative AI models, which, as you said, are the ones that are trained on large language models,
Right.
use machine learning, spit out content based on a database of stuff that they've scraped, basically.
Yeah.
And I think, let's see, where did I put the link for your video? There we go. I just saw a headline maybe like 3 days ago that was about how Meta won because they didn't have enough evidence that the copyright law would be irreparably harmed. And I was like, are you
the
so that little detail is like we lost on this one, but the war is not over.
Yeah, I just heard another thing about the judge basically said you didn't present enough evidence that showed directly the harm that you would experience, but he could see where this would be harmful.
Right.
But they just hadn't made their case. Yeah, so that a different case might be more successful if it was phrased or brought in a different way. So I am hopeful about that.
Yeah. So just to get our definitions out there so people are clear what we're talking about, generative AI is a subfield of AI that uses generative models to produce text, images, videos, or other forms of data. And of course, Brian and I are most concerned about text with like creative writing, but also images for any artists, videos for producers, actors, voice artists, etc. These models learn the underlying patterns and structures of their training data and use them to produce new data, aka slop, based on the input, which often comes in the form of natural language prompts. And that is from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia, not anything AI.
Not AI.
Yeah. So just to get that out there so that we know what definition we're working with.
I think it's important, and like we were talking about with really what we're talking about is machine learning or large language models. What we're really talking about here is AI that can generate things based on, like you were saying, what it's been fed. And so what it puts out is only a result of what it's been fed. But what I learned from reading the book, AI Empire, was that what Sam Altman, who's the OpenAI guy, and a lot of other people hope for and think they'll achieve is what they call artificial general intelligence, where the program will actually be able to generate its own prompts, its own thoughts, pursue its own directions. And, we're not there yet, but they seem confident that they can get us there, even though I don't think they have any idea how that will happen. I think they hope if they just create big enough, data centers and have what they refer to as compute, that's just computing power, that it will just magically happen, that somehow the computer will achieve some level of consciousness and just begin pursuing its own areas.
That's how it happens in all the sci-fi movies.
Yeah. So I part of me is like, you guys are that just sounds crazy. Did you just think it's just gonna, and maybe I missed how they think it's gonna happen, but in this book, I didn't get any indication of exactly how they think it's going to happen. And all they talk about in the book, Altman and others, just scale. There's constantly scaling up, making bigger data centers, putting in more information, more processing power and stuff like that. And I feel like they just think that at some point there'll just be this real artificial intelligence, which will be capable, like I said, of thinking on its own, setting its own agenda, creating its own prompts. And that's what they, I think in their utopian vision before they all became dirty capitalists trying to make billions of dollars, that's what they thought would, solve.
Before? There's a before?
Well, you have to read the book. And if you read the book, you'd know that at least they talked about not copywriting anything, having the code being out there, really seeing this as a boon, a benefit to humanity that would free us from all the labor that keeps us from being the more creative, happy human beings we are, which I'm just going to tell you, that's just wrong-headed in my personal opinion to begin with. But that's what
before we get into that state, okay, like their utopia version, when we're just thinking about the large language models and how they're being used today, one of the questions I was interested in prodding, seeing if there was any exploration of in the book or that you have done research on your own, is which area of society do you get most worried about this being deployed in? Because obviously we talked about books and publishing, but there's lots of other things where it could wreak havoc.
Right. Well, I think outside of like the things we think about as creatives being in danger, we're already seeing the damage being done to what I would refer to as entry-level jobs, or jobs that people like immigrants, poor people might have gotten in the past that gave them an economic base from which to build. Like we think about how cool like the Waymos are or the self-driving taxis are. Well, those put people out of work. Taxi driver used to be a job that people got and they could earn enough money and they could work their own hours and they could, make it fit in their life and they could support themselves in a, probably couldn't today, but at least get a leg up. And so those jobs are going away. And like a lot of entry level jobs, like what we would think about as like data entry or report writing jobs are already being lost. So, one of the things I think we're seeing, and I've heard other people say this reflected in the low jobs numbers, is that a lot of college graduates who used to come out and get those entry-level jobs where they summarize things or they wrote reports and those kind of things. Now, AI is doing that. I think that's already happening. And that is something that worries me, to be honest with you, more than the impact that it might have on creatives, because I think that's a much broader, deeper societal problem. What are these people going to do? Are we just going to, stuff them all in even lower wage service jobs until we can figure out a way, for those service jobs to be eliminated? I know I'm an old grumpy man, but I almost refuse to go to like the self-checkout place at a grocery store.
Yeah.
Because I think every one of those things is putting somebody out of work. You got 4 self-checkout things and one person watching. That's one job where there used to be 4, and those kind of things just bother me.
The type of job that is too, right? It's someone who is checking out with a scanner, using a cashier drawer, like saying something to you to ask you about your day, helping you bag it, if so, the cashier checker out job, versus someone who is watching to make sure you don't steal, to back up the camera system, and you don't have
and then help old men like me who mess up can't figure out how to pay.
So there's a shift, like definitely. It's I think a job as well as like the non-possibility of jobs,
Right. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's always happened. When we went from, horse and buggy to cars, a lot of people lost jobs, but this is different. This is not just, labor saving. This is actual labor replacement. It's not just, that this machine can do it faster and therefore we'll spend all this money on this big piece of machinery, which, over 10 years will pay off and eliminate 50 workers. This thing works right now to do what I need it to do. And I don't have to pay, college graduates $50,000, $60,000 coming out of college to do this work. Now I can just pay for this access to this program and it does all this stuff for me.
And what you're saying is that concentrates capital. It stops people from getting on an engine of economic earning, and it concentrates capital in the people who own the software, people who run the programs, and makes
who are
an inequality engine.
Yeah.
So I liked one of the things that you said in your AI video, which was if it's good enough, it will replace the labor. And if it's convenient, convenience in America is king. And, you know, I am of the camp that we have no kings in America, no king. But convenience is definitely one of those things that like lures everyone down off the striking line, right?
Right. Yeah.
What do you think about its seductiveness in terms of convincing people to go this way when they don't know all the costs on the other side?
I think we've already lost that battle.
Yeah.
I think
How do we get back? How do we call it
back? We have to we have to organize politically to get our government officials not to allow big data and these companies to have free reign to do whatever they want to. It has to be. There's only one entity in existence that can possibly regulate and control these businesses. Which, you know, sorry to go off on a tangent here, but we're seeing, you know, the stock market remains high, even though we know the economy is drifting downwards. Almost all the new money going to the stock market is going into technology and going into companies that are investing in AI. That's why the stock market is being held up by those companies. So that just means you're concentrating more wealth in those hands, and only the regulatory power of the government could possibly stop that. And I hate to tell you this, but unfortunately, they all already love Sam Altman and think he's a really cool guy, and have more or less.
I don't have a feel or a sense of who Sam Altman is. I think he's been out of the public eye. He's not like someone who's been caricatured like Peter Thiel in Don't Look Up, which gives me some sort of reference. So I have no idea who Sam Altman is.
Well, he kind of worked his way up through a connection with people like Thiel and then eventually Elon Musk to found a lot of tech businesses. And this kind of AI thing is one of the things that he is like the prophet of and the pusher of. And he, you know, talks a good game about this being for the benefit of humanity. And, you know, AI would create, you know, a utopian world for the American worker and the American citizen. And he was going to, like, you know, make sure we didn't do environmental harm. And he was going to make sure that we took care of people. And he was going to the business was nonprofit. And he was going to have all these kind of security groups within his company to make sure his product wasn't getting out of control. And as soon as somebody offered him, you know, $1 billion, like, yeah, hell with that. We're going to keep it secret. We're going to compete with the others. We're going to, you know, even though the company is still not publicly traded, it's, you know, something like a $500 billion company right now. And, you know, in the hands of private investors. And it's just, there's just a lot of power there already, and more money going into it. And I'm afraid the money to interest Thiel, Musk, et cetera, are just jumping on and trying to get their part of it and their level of control. Which, by the way, again, sound paranoid conspiracy theory, is one reason why we should have never let Elon Musk have access to all of our data that he got from the government, because he has an AI project as well. Guess what it's called? XAI, because he's original like that.
Yeah, water under the bridge.
Yeah, there's a certain element of that that's true. I think we as individuals have to make decisions that say we're going to choose to keep our data private when we're out given the choice. We're going to choose not to, you know, buy products that are created using AI in some way, books, artwork on our YouTube pages. That all those small things I think matter. Collectively, but they have to be done on an individual basis. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
So part of my model for the channel and my motivation for some of the series that I'm doing both this month and the Truth and Reconciliation for the Climate throughout the year is that, like, I have to do something to give me hope, and like even small steps are better than nothing. And building on community is one of the things that I need to get better at, and so strengthen those muscles. So after the election last year, I was sort of feeling like, well, I had to do something. And so those little steps, things like, talking about topics like this with people, have read a lot about them. And also just like exploring those on my own, and even the small things, you know, like I'm not going to jump down someone's throat for buying a book on Amazon, but I do want to give them the facts of like what it's costing other people.
Right. Yeah.
And make my position clear.
I think that, you know, the old phrase from the 80s was think global, act local. I think there's a certain element of that, even in the political sense, which, you know, is one of the things that I'm interested in, that we need to, you know, be working to elect people who are aware, even just aware of the danger of what we're talking about, and have an eye towards, you know, protecting us from it, to local government, to state government, and, you know, even before we start thinking about the national government. You know, we were asking if there earlier, before we came on, if there were data centers in Texas, and I didn't really know the answer. And I should, because I should know the answer so I can, you know, be active in trying to you know, stop the environmental damage done by those data centers. And that's something that we can do. And we can, you know, I think if we just started electing people who are younger than 70, it might help.
Crazy
Weird idea. I know. What if we elected some of these
so
young whippersnappers who know what the hell's going on, instead of like 80-year-old men are like, wait a minute, I can text somebody across the country? Yeah, you can. Dude.
And so we were talking about labor replacing, and before we move on to data privacy, since there's so many aspects of this, I did want to bring up one of the books that relates to this. So I'm doing a reread of this, How to Do Nothing by Jenny Odell, Resisting the Attention Economy. And in it, Grace, who is another guest, is going to come on next week. She's hosting the read along. In this book, in chapter 5, which I just read, which is the chapter for August, Jenny Odell is talking about how there's an ecology of strangers, and there's a whole world in a drop of rain, basically. This idea that we are so individualized and so educated and trained and conditioned to think the smoothest, most efficient way, the separate, apart, don't touch the things on the plate, the peas, don't touch the carrots. This sort of thinking of like the easiest, most convenient thing is the way to go, individualization. And what she's pointing to in this ecology is that you can't take one thing out and get a machine to do the same consequence, because it's interacting with everything in the landscape. It's like the arrogance of thinking that you can dam up a river and use the water for electricity, but then like all the things that are going on upriver, downriver, above the river, below the river aren't going to be affected.
Right.
It's like we think we can just pull this one thing out and replace it with this thing that we invented without realizing, oh, there's this whole like system that we don't even know about. So,
and, you know,
that was really good.
I think it's a byproduct of industrialization and our belief that, you know, automation and efficiency is the key to our utopian future, which is just, you know, I don't want to go back to before there was the internet. I don't want to go back to before, you know, I could get a books and order books online from bookshop.org or wherever. You know, I don't want to go back to that, but at the same time, I don't want to. I feel like we have just given up on an idea that idea of community that you're talking about, and our interconnectedness, and that we're kind of just silo ourselves more and more and more. And, you know, since I am political, we couldn't possibly have a worse person to be president of the United States at this moment, other than somebody who is, I'm going to call him an industrialist, even though he didn't really manufacture anything, but somebody who is in that world and who believes those people are the best people, are the people who should be running things. I mean, you just look at the people he's appointed to run things. They're business people. They're not, you know, the ambassador of the UN is a real estate guy who, you know, I think he had to get a passport to leave to go do his job because he'd never been out of the country.
I think a lot of the people are what's it called? Performative in the role. He got podcasts, he got online show hosts, he got people who sit and talk about things like they know what they're doing, but don't necessarily have the expertise.
Yeah, but it's just anyway. So to me, that's, I mean, from an environmental point of view, from a data privacy point of view, from an AI takeover point of view, he is not going to step in. And you can call me paranoid or conspiracy theory or whatever. He's not going to step in and do anything about it. He's not, and neither is his party. They are not going to do anything about it. Now, a lot of the stuff with AI and the lack of regulation and Sam Altman charming senators and things like that happened under the Biden administration. Absolutely did. And, the Biden administration and Democrats let him write a lot of the regulations that they did create. But they are all just, I don't know how we've started electing people who are so obsequious to other people, who they just feel like, oh, well, that guy, he's a genius. And so I should just, whatever he says must be true. He couldn't possibly have an ulterior motive like money. Yeah. Anyway, so sorry.
Yeah, my tangent is going to be, I'm reading a book about trust, and he says he's a trust researcher, and he says that there's two parts of trusting someone, whether they're competent to do the thing or whether they have the integrity to follow through on the thing and like tell you that they know how to do it. And it's just like one is the cover for the other in this case. Right. It's the perfect storm. Yeah.
It just blows my mind that the same people who don't trust research scientists who've devoted their entire lives to developing expertise in some kind of scientific field trust a real estate guy to run, foreign policy. Anyway.
Okay, so data privacy. Again, this sort of veers into the How to Resist Amazon book, which I'll be talking about next week. But there's a mining aspect of AI. So the way they got to be able to use this tool is scraping data. And we have varying attitudes towards data privacy. I feel like the culture these days is either, conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat, like they have everything, I'm going to shut everything down, or they have everything, we can't do anything anyway, what's the use, like whatever, come at me, China, So do you think this is a generational thing? Do you think this is influenced by something else? Like, where do you fall, and where do you see the other spectrum?
I don't want to sound like I'm attacking younger generation, but they have no reason to remember a time at which data was private, in which this information, and there was so much information, wasn't just out there and accessible and findable. Even just if you wanted to find my phone number, you could probably find it online in 45 seconds. And I don't have my phone number listed anywhere, but didn't think I did, but I'm pretty sure you could find it. And you could find my address, and you could find pictures of me that have been posted online. And even if I didn't post them, you could still find me. And I think that what social media, the internet has done is just kind of broken down our understanding of what being private was in all kinds of ways. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure that there is a solution other than to try to elect government officials who will stop data mining. But again, are we ever going to do that? Is that ever going to...
It's almost like we need some sort of cataclysmic event that wipes out and starts over all of those gathered data.
Yeah, that even then it would probably still... I don't know. I don't know the solution. I know that like I was saying about doing something, I think individually you just have to do your best to keep as much of your data private as you possibly can. And I don't think that future generations are going to worry about it like I am. I think that will go away, and I think we will live in a world in which we accept that corporations, at the very least, have access to our data. I mean, I think
Elaine says younger ones don't understand personal boundaries. But here's the thing, because I remember studying. We told Witold Rybczynski, our friend,
right? Yeah.
You read. I think he and one other author I read early on were talking about the architecture of the house and how that changed from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance to the Industrial Age. And so privacy has gone through a really interesting history. Like having our own rooms is sort of a weird thing. Anyone from 500 years ago would be like,
yeah,
what are you doing? You're wasting all that energy. And so when we think of
why aren't you sharing your room with the cow to keep warm? Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. But like the privacy thing is on different tracks. You know, when we think of data privacy, we don't realize it's kind of why this can just be glossed over in politics, because a lot of people don't understand. I don't fully understand, you know, like the cloud. Definitely people older than me don't understand the cloud and how it works.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. So glossing over that and saying it's fine, you're going to be safe, like, and then trusting those people, that's the problem. But privacy, the thing that I'm thinking of where we have to be in community and rely on each other and talk to each other more, which is like still weird and feels funny to me, that is a renegotiation of privacy. And you know, I think of different cultures where it's more normative for parents to be in their children's business, for example, or for different generations to live together, or, you know, like people to be in the same room. And it's like, you have boundaries that you grew up with, but you may have to renegotiate them. And like, that could be a big crisis in a personal life, but we need to get closer to that, I think.
Yeah. But, you know, well, all I'll say about the cloud is the cloud exists in a physical location.
Yes.
It's not actually just, you know, in the ether. There's
right.
And I think
it's not
a lot
Wi-Fi
of people,
signal. It's a data center somewhere world away.
It's in, or more than one. Yeah.
Right.
Being used to send you advertisement or generate whatever.
Okay. And speaking of the data centers where all our private data are being stored, that brings us to the environmental impact. So besides the legal issues, besides the violation of consent, besides the governing with the wool over our eyes, there's the whole element of the other side of where the processing is happening. So it uses a lot of clean water. It uses a lot of electricity. And how did it play out in the book? Because you were saying that it's in other places of the world where people were trying to fight being exploited for that. Right. How did that play out?
I think that's why the book's titled AI Empire, because what we're seeing is almost like the colonization of, I'm going to use the term third world countries because I can't remember the proper one anymore, but of third world countries. There we go. Developing countries are being colonized by these tech companies, these AI companies, which has so much money, and they go to places where people are poor. They offer to create temporary jobs, permanent jobs, whatever, and they make deals with the government to gain access to the water, to the electricity. And what they end up doing is what all colonizers do: make life harder for the people being colonized, make the situation, the environment worse for the place being colonized, take resources from the people who live in the place being colonized. And that's really what these AI companies are doing. And one thing that makes them different than a company that manufactures something physical is that they can have their data centers anywhere. It doesn't matter. You know, they don't have to transport a product that's made. They don't have to transport resources to a location for manufacturing. There's not that logistical problem. Those data centers can be anywhere. And I think that's something that I knew, but I wonder if that's something that occurs to people with this. So you see them going to South American countries and trying to gain access to water that people need for farming and for drinking.
And not just South America, because that's piloted in the book, but a quick Google search will show me rural Georgia and Texas.
There you go. Thanks.
About people running out of water resources.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I can see Texas being a target because there is a large underground pool of water that sits under Texas called the Edwards Aquifer, which, you know, I probably draw my water now where I live from that body of water. I live in a place where there's basically a lot of limestone, and underneath that there's water. Yeah. And so, I can see where that would definitely be a target. I think that these AI companies would do the same thing in rural America as they do in other countries. And maybe they'll be more successful here because our politicians are more in bed with them than even, you know, we think about politicians in the developing world being willing to trade the well-being of their people for money for themselves or campaign donations or power or whatever it is. So yeah, that is worrying. But you know, the thing is about
some places where we should check though, because I'm like, Kentucky's got to have one of those going in, right?
Yeah, I would
think, majority like
West Virginia, surely.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what I would say is, you were right. It requires a tremendous amount of water to cool these huge processing, this processing equipment, and it has to be potable water. It cannot be like water that hasn't been treated. Yeah, it can't be salt water, because that would clog the cooling tubes. And make it less efficient, and wouldn't cool as well. And somewhere in the book it said that, if you asked ChatGPT to create a work of art for you, that it would use up about 3 12-ounce bottles of water to create that work of art for you. And if every kid asking ChatGPT to write their essay, it's like 1 bottle of water. And the book also talks about how much electricity it uses. The AI people, Sam Altman, who again the book focuses on, are confident they'll come up with a solution to create these data processing centers on this huge scale, and yet mitigate the environmental problems, and find solutions to the energy problems. I think if we go back to embracing nuclear power in the United States of America again, it will be driven by AI.
3 Mile Island was put back into emergency energy generation.
I think that would be, they see that as the solution, that we could generate these tremendous amount of power at a not immediate environmental risk, as long as we didn't have a disaster, which will happen.
Kick the can down the road, right?
Who
cares about kids, grandkids? So here's a question on that, which is, you had the reason I was thinking about those videos is like the moral outrage. I think your character needs to come back. I don't know if you had a name for that character with the muscle tee, but like the moral outrage of the people who the Republicans are actually describing as like the 30-something dudes playing video games in their parents' basement, of them querying some stupid, probably vulgar, probably vaguely pornographic request to ChatGPT, and like just wasting all this water while other people do not have it to drink, or being turned off the water meter because of water prices or electricity prices in a winter, for example. And I just get this like boiling up feeling, like there are some things in this world that trigger me. And that is one of those things, like people doing luxury things with no concern for how it affects other people. And that makes my blood boil. Like, do you see a series there?
Maybe. I don't know. I think it just, I have to limit the amount of rage that I engage in on a daily basis. But yeah, I think, I think about this. Since I used to be a teacher, I oftentimes think about how the impact this has on education, which is apparently just devastating. And part of me wants to say to teachers, there's a solution to your kids using AI to generate their essays and their homework. And the solution is for you to stop relying on technology to assign those things, to grade those things, to accept those things. Have your kids write in class with a pen on a piece of paper. That is, I can't think of another solution. I've seen some schools have just said, oh, well, to hell with it. We'll just embrace the whole thing. And who cares if anybody learns anything? College is all about paying the high tuition and keeping the football team on the field. So we don't really care if you know anything. Yeah. I was saying that, and there's a high school. They're building a new high school in a small town where I live. And it's literally like just down the street, and they're building a huge football stadium because the little town I live in has a very successful high school football team. So,
yeah. Education down the tubes. One of the things that I was thinking about with generative AI is that it's one of the studies that came out that Skeptic did a great video on was the fact that if you keep iterating, you get dumber. Like one of the studies studied people who did it, and they got lazier and lazier, and they like were able to think for themselves less and less. Yep. And one of the things I was thinking about, but has that been happening since like ancient Sparta when they were real men and like real hard, and we've just gotten life made easier and easier for us? Is there a line that we've crossed that was like, yes, labor saving devices and easier life and, quality of living, but then also like not thinking for yourself, like danger territory?
I'm afraid that thinking is going to become a skill that fewer and fewer people have. And just like when I used to teach, I taught American history, and I taught about, you know, in the past, before we had as much technology, people had bigger skill sets. You know,
Yeah, generalists.
my grandfather could do all kinds of things. He knew,
Yeah.
because he had to know how to do all kinds of things, fix a
Mhm.
car, he'd do electrical work. He ran a crane for a while. I mean, he could do all kinds of things. By the time my dad was born in the early 40s and was then in college in 1960, his skill set could be smaller because modern conveniences had meant that he didn't have to know as much as his dad did about those things. And my skill set compared to my dad's is much smaller.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be as big. And I'm just worried that we're making thinking into one of those things. That in the same way that convenience items and technology meant that, you know, I don't have to know how to fix my car. And my car
One
can
of these
be
things is not like the other. Thinking is sort of basic. It's sort of essential.
Well, but I think you could argue that at some point, you know, being able to hunt and prepare and preserve food was essential.
Mm-hmm.
And
it will be again. I predict. Very few
of us know how to do that now.
Yeah.
You know, my mom could can vegetables, and she could make jelly and all kinds of stuff like that at home, and did, because, you know, her parents were adults during the Great Depression. But I don't know how to do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I could learn online, but, you know, then it's becomes a hobby and not like. So I just wonder if we won't make thinking into a hobby that only some people choose to engage in,
or are allowed to,
engage in. Yes. You know, I worry very much about the future, and if all this bad stuff you think's going to happen. I hope I'm dead by then, but I hope it doesn't happen for the sake of my, you know, kids and granddaughter and stuff like that. I hope we find a way out. I hope that, you know, part of me hopes that the AI people are right, that if they devote, let's say, 7% of their investment to paying people to think of ways to make the data centers more energy efficient, to use less water, to be smaller, that they might actually find the solution. That
there's not enough Earth. There's only one Earth, and there's not enough of it. People have done studies. We're already past our boundaries, our budget of earthly resources in 6 out of 9 categories. We're already like borrowing from the future.
Yeah,
so.
I got you, but I you know, part of me, if there's an optimistic part of me, I have a great faith in human ingenuity, and I think people will find solutions or workarounds at some point. And maybe not before. Maybe not before the disaster happens, but at least after it.
Yeah. I mean, you've watched Don't Look Up, right?
Yes.
So, like, some people will learn how to survive or take the right approach, and some people will not. So,
well, I think that's where, you know, and I read Station 11 recently, which I loved. I don't like dystopian books at all, because, well, I'm disturbed enough without those. But I read Station 11. I thought, you know, here this disaster happens, familiar disaster, health related. 99% of the world's population dies, and the other 1% figures out different ways to survive. And eventually they figure out ways to regenerate some of the things that they had before, to once again make life easier. And so, you know, I guess maybe call that optimism. I have that kind of optimism.
All right. So Elaine says, yeah, the thing that's not computing, growing up, we were told to cut back on electricity. Now here we are, electric cars and more. I would say that's replacing, and like some of that can be good. There's math going on there that I would need to like go over. So we won't do that here.
I saw it. You've probably seen it, but I saw a really interesting video with an English guy saying, you know, if we'd invented electric cars first, no one would buy a gasoline powered car, because the electric car is better than the gasoline powered car in almost every conceivable way. It's simpler. It has fewer moving parts. It doesn't generate as much heat. It doesn't it doesn't generate, you know, as much environmental damage. It's quieter, all these other kinds of things that are benefits of the electric car. If we'd done that first, and you tried to sell somebody a gasoline powered car, they'd tell you you're an idiot, because nobody. Well,
I think there were electric cars at the beginning, but they didn't have enough get up and go. So in the crazy
mean,
experimental phase 1 and got all the infrastructure, and then you have sunk
fair.
costs. So.
Yes, fair.
But it did take a lot of sunk costs to float that system.
That's true, and still does.
Yeah. So Gareth says lots of teachers that I work with that don't like the AI usage, but our managers insist we embrace it. Senior management. And I think this is, again, a bigger problem that's just getting highlighted with the AI issue, because senior management, top heavy educational institutions, means teachers on the front lines, if I could say, aren't getting the resources, and their just administration is expanding.
Well, and you know, the thing is that I think that maybe this is true with Garrett's school, is true with mine. You know, I'm old enough that I taught before there was like technology in the classroom, really, other than like, you know, like a VCR or something like that, a computer lab down the hall maybe. But we push schools to embrace technology, to teach kids to use technology so much that now I think those senior management people see any resistance to technology as, you know, as wrong-headed, right? That they need to embrace it. They need to push for it. They need to figure out how we can get kids to work with it and all those kind of things. And at some point I'm like, I'm not sure that this is.
Don't call me a Luddite. I won't get my funding next year. Yeah. Elaine says, yeah, I made students use paper and pencil because if tech crashes, you still have work to do.
There you go.
The staff would roll their eyes. How dare? Yeah. And she's agreeing with you here. Yeah. I've watched it a few times. I haven't watched it in a while now because it's one of those things that like sits on you, like flatten your mood, you know, because like it's beautiful and tragic, and also it's way too realistic.
Yeah.
So it's not like an escapist anything. You're just like, Yeah. Except when the power goes out. No electricity, no car, plus their batteries non-recyclable and need many rare elements. That's true.
All those things are true.
Yeah.
But all those things can be improved on still.
Right. Solar,
they
batteries.
Can make better. Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we stop burning fossil fuels to generate electricity, then the cost of the electrical car goes down in terms of its environmental costs, et cetera. So, but we're, you know, like I said, the worst possible person is President of the United States right now, and we're going the wrong direction on any kind of thing having to do with renewable energy whatsoever.
Right. Yes. All right. So the moral outrage, was there a time where the last time we deployed moral outrage, it was successful? Can you remember that? That was one of the questions I sent. I didn't come up with an example, but
successfully deployed moral outrage. Well, I think the Black Lives Matter movement successfully deployed moral outrage, at least in getting one person convicted and sent to prison.
Derek Chauvin.
However temporarily that was. I think those things, you know, I do think that I think that the forces of repression are much better at branding the opposition than the side of, you know, freedom is at branding, you know, the reverse. So, you know, as soon as the Black Lives Matter movement, and, you know, there was scandal with the BLM and some funding issues, and as soon as the violence associated, even though the violence wasn't necessarily having anything to do with the protests, except they were adjacent, I think once that happened, then there was it was easy to brand those things as dangerous, you know, and I have nothing against Antifa, but every time they show up, we're going to take a step backwards, I think, unless they literally go out there and kick some ass and not take care of some people. I just don't think I just see that as a negative, because I think too many people like me are too afraid of losing what we have in an attempt to make things better for other people. I think that's a core thing. Like, yes, we would love for there to be justice in the United States of America, but not at the cost of, like, you know, somebody throwing firecrackers at the federal building in Portland. We don't want that, you know, because that's way too much. So those kind of things bother me. It reminds me a lot of like how many, you know, so-called progressive white Southerners encourage Black people during the civil rights movement just tone it down a little bit. Be more patient. Like, what the hell are you talking about? If we're more patient, it's never going to happen. And I feel like that's kind of, you know, that's kind of where we are. And that's kind of why I hope the non-Trump major party embraces young people in a way that it pretended to, I think, in 2020, but that it's been abandoned in 2024.
You're too young for like being aware of the Black Panthers as a movement, right?
I knew the name Black Panthers and like the graffiti in the old wing of my high school. Sometimes there was some Black Panther graffiti in there, left over from the early 70s. But yeah, I think my first anything I knew about the Black Panthers, other than, I grew up in the South. So what the Black Panthers reputation in my hometown was not good. The first time I saw anything, I think, different than that was the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal, who was arrested for and serving a life sentence in prison for killing a police officer in Philadelphia. He was associated with Black Panthers. And through learning about him, I learned about some things about the government's attacks on the Black Panther movement. I'm sorry, did that go? That's probably not what you were asking me.
No. I mean, it was just in terms of the fullness of the movement and having one piece of it pulled out and the whole movement tarred is like the MO. So,
like they had free breakfast for kids, and they had educational facilities, and they did all kinds of things to try to help to do what conservatives say people in those communities should be doing is help themselves. Well, they were, and then you like attack their headquarters and you killed their leader, and you had COINTELPRO like doing all kinds of horrible things behind this. I mean, So I feel like I think that will happen over and over again. Yeah. I don't know.
Okay, so what about hopeful avenues? So I know you said your optimism is founded in the what if the AI is right and it can efficiency its way out, but
that's
also
not the only place.
Else?
I think I think the
regulation.
I think the book gives some hope in that there is resistance in developing nations to try to fight against AI. And I think that those can be models for resistance in local communities in the United States and everywhere. To find the lawyers who will do the work pro bono, to look at the law and find those places where you can use the law to prevent. Because once you can put it in court, once you can get it out of, I think, the elected parts of our government where money seems to have so much influence, I still think the courts are the place where you have a chance to actually achieve some justice.
Not if it goes up all the way. Okay, all right. Well, I'll take that. We'll take that.
I mean, what I would say, my faith in the federal court system in the United States is that federal judges are appointed for life. And that means that, they can serve 30, 40 years, and they come from all kinds of different backgrounds. And MAGA is relatively, in the great span of things, is a relatively short time period. And even in Trump's first term, he messed up and appointed some actual judges who had integrity. He's not going to do that again, because he don't want to make that mistake of appointing people who have integrity again. But in his first term, he did, with the exception of,
he has old appointees that he's angry at. So
So that was, again, like I said, the worst possible person to have elected president in the moment we're in. And he is already done immense damage. And 3.5 more years of this, I'm not sure where we're going to be. I agree. They have been co-opted, but there are still life-appointed federal judges who are appointed by Clinton and Obama and Reagan and, well, not Reagan, but George W. Bush, who are people of who are people of integrity, who are really committed to the idea of justice, even if they come at it from a conservative point of view. I still think that's the strongest firewall we have against what's going on, but it's not very strong, other than the American people eventually getting enough, which, I never root for economic disaster, but that would probably wake more people up if things got bad.
Well, that's what we're seeing right now with the tariffs a little bit, right?
Oh,
but okay, so wait, don't go off in your tangents.
Okay.
So do you think it would be a more persuasive tactic to shock people with the cost of AI, or to appeal to their, humanitarian side on the cost to other people? What is the tactic? Which road do we take Which one would be more successful, do you think?
I think shock would be more successful. What you're going to have a constant barrage supported by people who have a big enough reach to get the stories out there about the damage being done, about the danger being done. And I'll be honest with you, of all the things that I think have capitulated in the United States, the most I fear the press has given up the fastest. I don't think they're even trying. Yeah, I don't think they're even trying. I think they just show up at the White House, they see the monkey show, they ask their questions to the monkey, and the monkey gives an inane answer, and they act like it was reasonable, and they put it on TV. And they go, okay, well, I got my paycheck today. Access journalism is killing journalism in the United States.
Maybe that's where Caroline with a K gets her answers. She just asks ChatGPT.
Maybe. I mean, you gotta hand it to politicians. Those weasels can figure out how to ruin every single thing. And after Iran Contra, I think in the late 80s, what politicians realize is just have the press come in all the time. Just have them there. Have them on the plane. Have them ask questions. Do a lot. What hurt Joe Biden? He seemed to disappear at the end of his presidency. He didn't hold enough press conferences. What does Trump do? He's on TV every damn day. And the press is just there like, Mr. President, what do you think about this? And he'll say something stupid. They're like, oh, okay, great. And they never ask him a follow-up. And no other person shifts from the question they were going to answer, ask a follow-up that would maybe like go one level. Oh, it's just, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I had a follow-up question on that, and I just forgot what it was. It was something about not the press. There are people who are doing good journalism. They're doing through Substacks and through podcasts through very small outlets. But what I think was pointed out to me through an Indivisible training is that we need to build up capacity. So it's an international development language. We need to build up the capacity to work together to resist long term before we can launch that effort. If we launch it now, we're just going to get.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why the podcasters are probably the people who have to be co-opted. We have to find a way we have to support podcasters who understand the things that we're worried about. Because I still think right now for the next election, I still think that's where the influence, our ability to influence a large segment of the public lies. Like if we could just get Joe Rogan to shut up or at least keep talking about the Epstein files, then we might get somewhere if we could support. And, when they said, oh, we have to get left-wing podcasters to read Joe Rogan, I was like, oh, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. At the same time, I don't think you can ignore that idea. I think that has to be a part of what happens. And I think, we all have to try to find and support those people where we can to build their platform so their reach gets bigger, so more people listen to them and they have more influence. But I think that will fade quickly. I don't think that's a 2 election cycle thing. I think that's a 1 more election cycle thing, maybe.
And we can keep our books, right? So one of the 1984 things is like, if you don't have ancient papyrus to prove anything else existed, how do you know we aren't telling you the truth through the press? And it's like, no, I have this encyclopedia here. You have proof. You have the truth.
Yes, I still have an encyclopedia, maybe for that exact reason.
Really?
And history textbooks. Yeah, I kept old history textbooks so that I know that at least at some point we knew what was actually or closer to true. So yeah.
I just want you to know that my mom was a career politician in the local California scene. But yeah, she's saying a lot of this is true. The lack of true reporting has been compromised for years, ever since the news got combined with the advertising. Yeah, the advertorials, and also the mergers, and like it starts at the top and then trickles down. Yeah.
I agree with this.
Anchors. Yeah.
I think that what I oftentimes see and react to is the surface level thing, and then all those other things are behind that. My problem with access journalism is actually a problem with corporate media and mergers and all the other things we're talking about.
The leadership. It's very hard.
And because CNN wouldn't want to piss Trump off so bad that they kicked their reporter out of the
pool.
White House press pool. That would just be a tragedy, wouldn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe then they go out and do some reporting. maybe.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. I had one question that I was going to circle back to. Elaine was asking, how does that explain Sophia? But I don't know what this is. Has citizenship and spoken in front of the UN more than once. Is this like an AI bot? Sophia means wisdom. This sounds like it would be like a prototype, but I didn't know what that referred to. So if you don't know either, we just don't have the capacity to answer it. But I thought I'd bring that. Any
may
last
in fact
questions?
be one of the prototype systems that they're. I can't remember if it's mentioned in the book or not. Like I said, I have the e-copy and I don't have my Kindle.
It's long. It's long. It's a big book. So I was like, I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big book.
All right. So today we talked about Empire of AI by Karen Hao. It is pretty focused on OpenAI and Sam Altman in particular, but we are also happy discussing the more general state of affairs with AI and its problems, because that's enough. That's enough for a whole hour. But yeah, thank you, Brian, for coming on the channel and sharing with us a bit of your agitation, and hopefully
I think I shared way more agitation than people needed, but
no, I think we need more of it, and it needs to be sustained. So any bit of juice and power to the movement is appreciated. And
well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks to everyone who is watching either here in live or on the replay. We have Agitation August Talks every weekday in August, and tomorrow is going to be Elaine of Cobalt Dragon. We're going to be talking about Steering by Starlight by Martha Beck as her shook her up book, which I'm very excited about. I think it's going to be a bit more positive conversation too. If you need an
I hope so. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and take care.
Thank you.